What's up, everyone? Farid here. Welcome back to the Rational Farid. So today we're tackling a big one, a really big one. We're going to talk about the character of God as he's presented in the Bible. And before we dive into the deep end, I want to start on common ground. Let's begin with the version of God that almost everyone, religious or not, is familiar with. I'm talking about the Sunday school God, the one you hear about in hymns and prayers, the official story, if you will. You know the pitch. It's been repeated for 2,000 years. God is love. It's the single most comforting and powerful idea in all of Christianity. This idea that the creator of the universe is a being of infinite goodness, that he's the ultimate moral compass, a perfect, all-knowing, and, most importantly, all-loving father figure. He's a good shepherd, watching over his flock. He's our rock, our fortress. He is the very definition of justice and mercy, all rolled into one. The story we're sold is that this being wants nothing more than the best for us, that he feels our pain, and that he offers a path to eternal peace and comfort. And let's be fair, that's a pretty compelling sales pitch. Who wouldn't want that to be true? The idea of a cosmic safety net, a perfectly benevolent parent who has our backs, is probably one of the most comforting thoughts a person can have. This image, this promise of a perfectly good and loving God is the absolute bedrock of the faith. It has to be, because without it, the whole system of morality, worship, and devotion falls apart. It's a beautiful concept. And that's exactly where our investigation begins today, with that promise. But what happens when we move past the PR campaign and actually open the book he supposedly wrote? Does the character we meet in the pages of the Bible actually live up to that promise? Let's find out. But then you actually open the Bible and start reading it for yourself. You treat it like any other book, and you just look at what the character of God actually does. And it doesn't take long. I mean, you're barely out of the opening chapters of the very first book before you run headfirst into a character that sounds nothing like a loving father. He sounds like a mass murderer. Let's start with the big one, the story everyone knows, Noah's flood. You can find it in Genesis chapters 6 through 9. According to the story, God looks down at the world he created, sees that humans are being wicked, and regrets even making them. Now, a loving, all-wise parent might try to teach, guide, or inspire them to be better. But that's not what this God does. His solution is to hit the reset button by committing global genocide. He decides to drown the entire planet. Not just the wicked people, everyone. Men, women, children, toddlers, newborn babies. He kills pregnant women. He even wipes out all the land animals and birds that had absolutely nothing to do with anything. It's the most indiscriminate slaughter imaginable. Let's be perfectly clear here. If any human leader in history ordered the execution of every single person on a continent, including all the children, we would rightly call them a monster, a genocidal tyrant. There would be no debate. And yet, when God does it to the entire world, people call it a cleansing. That's not justice. That's not wisdom. That's a cosmic temper tantrum. And this isn't a one-off event. It's a pattern. A few chapters later, in Genesis 19, we get the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, God is unhappy with the behavior in these cities. His solution? He rains down burning sulfur from the sky and incinerates both cities completely. Again, it's total destruction. Every man, woman, and child is burned alive. There's no trial, no due process, no chance for the innocent to escape. Just collective punishment on a massive scale. And the one guy he decides is righteous enough to save, Lot, literally offers his 2 virgin daughters to an angry mob to be gang raped just moments before. This is the guy who gets the divine seal of approval? It's morally incoherent. So just a few pages into the Bible, the all-loving God has already wiped out the entire global population with a flood, and then firebombed at least 2 cities out of existence. This is the first and maybe the biggest crack in the facade. The promise of a God of love crashes head-on with the actions of a character who is, by any reasonable definition, a violent and brutal killer. Therefore, you have to ask yourself, Are these the actions of a perfect moral being? Or are they the actions of something else entirely? Therefore, if you look at these stories, it becomes pretty clear that this isn't just about an angry God wiping out sinners. There's a deeper, more disturbing pattern here. The motivation isn't justice, it's an obsession with control and loyalty. When you move past the big apocalyptic events and look at how God interacts with his supposed favorites one-on-one, the character doesn't get better. He gets worse. The scale of the violence shrinks, but the cruelty becomes way more personal. We've moved from God as a warlord to something that feels a lot more like God as an abusive partner. Let's talk about Abraham. This guy is held up as the ultimate model of faith. And what's his big test? You can read it in Genesis 22. God goes to Abraham and says, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." Let's just pause and really think about what's being asked here. The creator of the universe is commanding a father to tie up his own child, slit his throat, and burn his body on an altar. Why? Not because Isaac did anything wrong, not to achieve some greater good, but simply as a test, a loyalty test, to prove that Abraham fears God more than he loves his own son. This isn't a moral lesson. This is psychological torture, plain and simple. No loving moral being would ever demand that kind of twisted proof of devotion. If a human cult leader did this today, we'd lock him up. But because it's God, it's praised as a story of profound faith. It's not. It's a story of profound abuse. And if you think that's a one-off, let's look at Job. The book literally opens with God bragging to Satan about what a good and righteous guy Job is. Job has done nothing wrong. In fact, he's the best of the best. But Satan calls God's bluff. He says, yeah, Job only loves you because you've given him everything. So what does our all-loving, all-powerful God do? He makes a bet. He gives Satan permission to destroy this good man's life just to prove a point and win a cosmic wager. Satan kills Job's children, all 10 of them. He kills his livestock, destroys his home. And when Job still doesn't curse God, God doubles down and lets Satan cover Job's body in agonizing sores. All of this suffering, the death of his kids, the loss of everything he owns, the physical torment, is for one reason and one reason only: to satisfy God's ego. These aren't stories about building character or punishing sin. They're about a being who needs constant validation, a being who demands you prove your love by being willing to destroy what you hold most dear, or by enduring pointless suffering without question. If a friend demanded you hurt someone to prove your friendship, you'd call them a monster. You'd run. But when this character does it in the Bible, we're told it's holy. It's a moral standard we would never accept from anyone else. So why do people accept it from God? But I can already hear the keyboards clacking. I know exactly what many of you are thinking right now, because it's the #1 go-to defense in the Christian playbook. Farid, come on, that's the Old Testament God. He was harsh, we get it. But that's why Jesus came. He brought a new covenant, a new message of love, peace, and forgiveness. He fixed everything. This is the great firewall of Christian apologetics. It's the idea that the New Testament hits the factory reset button on God's personality. The angry, genocidal warlord retires, and his gentle hippie son takes over the family business with a new message of turn the other cheek and love your neighbor. This is the last best hope for salvaging a moral God out of the Bible. But here's the question. Did the message really change? Or did the marketing just get better? Let's look at what the character of Jesus actually says in the New Testament. Far from being a peacemaker, he says the exact opposite. In Matthew 10:34, he's crystal clear. He goes on to say he's here to turn families against each other, a son against his father, a daughter against her mother. His message is so divisive that he demands in Luke 14:26 that his followers must hate their father, mother, wife, children, and siblings to be worthy of him. Now, apologists will say hate just means love less in comparison, but that's still a demand for absolute family-splitting loyalty. And what about the punishment for not following him? Did that get softer? Not at all. In fact, the character of Jesus is obsessed with hell. He talks about eternal fire, outer darkness, and weeping and gnashing of teeth constantly. He describes a place where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. This isn't the language of a gentle teacher. It's the language of a threat. It's the same old fear-based system, just with a new frontman. Even the core of the good news itself is incredibly violent. The whole concept of salvation rests on the idea of a human sacrifice. Think about it. The all-powerful creator of the universe was so offended by the flawed humans he created that the only way he could bring himself to forgive them was if his own son was brutally tortured and executed. What kind of morality is that? It's not forgiveness, it's a cosmic blood debt. So when you strip away the stained glass image, you find that the system is the same. The threats are even more explicit. The demand for unquestioning loyalty is just as absolute. The brand got a facelift, but the core product, submission or eternal punishment, remains exactly the same. Therefore, if the character of God is consistently violent and controlling in both the Old and New Testaments, it stands to reason that the rulebook he hands down would reflect that personality. And it does. This isn't just about a few ugly stories we can dismiss as metaphors. This is about the very legal and moral framework that is presented as a foundation for Judeo-Christian ethics. The whole system is flawed from the ground up. Let's start with the big one, the Ten Commandments. People hold these up as the ultimate perfect moral code, but have you actually looked at them lately? The first four have literally nothing to do with morality. They're all about God's ego. Don't worship other gods. Translation, don't you dare look at anyone else. Don't make idols. Translation, and don't even think about making fan art of them. Don't take my name in vain. Translation, respect me. Keep the Sabbath holy. Translation, and don't forget my special day. These aren't moral rules. They're loyalty clauses in a contract with a deeply insecure deity. Only when you get halfway down the list do you get to the basic, obvious stuff like don't murder and don't steal. Rules that literally every human society figures out on its own to avoid collapsing. But what's more telling is what's not on that list. There is no commandment against rape, no commandment against child abuse, and most glaringly, no commandment against slavery. And that's because the Bible doesn't condemn slavery. Far from it. The Bible provides a handy owner's manual for it. In Exodus 21, God lays out the rules. You can buy and sell human beings. You can beat your slaves, and as long as they don't die within a day or two, you're in the clear. Because this is a direct quote. They are your property. You can even sell your own daughter into slavery. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a divinely approved feature. And it doesn't stop there. The legal framework is littered with commands that are, by any modern standard, atrocious. In Deuteronomy 7, God commands the Israelites to commit outright genocide. He tells them to enter the promised land and utterly destroy the 7 nations living there. The command is explicit. You shall make no covenant with them and show them no mercy. This isn't a story about a defensive war, it's a divine instruction for ethnic cleansing, written down as law. So when you look at the actual rulebook, you don't find a blueprint for a just and compassionate society. You find the legal code for a brutal, patriarchal, Bronze Age tribal monarchy, obsessed with loyalty, conquest, and control. It's a system where human beings are property, and genocide is a sacred duty. This isn't a foundation for morality, it's a foundation for barbarism. But after you lay all of this out, the mass murder, the psychological abuse, the laws endorsing slavery and genocide, and you've backed it all up with chapter and verse, you inevitably hit the final unbreakable wall of apologetics. It's the ultimate conversation ender, the intellectual white flag. It's the moment your religious friend or family member looks at you, sighs, and says, well, God works in mysterious ways. His plan is not for us to understand. This is the get-out-of-jail-free card for every theological problem ever. Can't explain why God allows children to get cancer? Mysterious ways. Don't understand why the creator of the universe needed to drown babies? His plan is beyond you. It's a thought-stopping cliché designed to make you feel arrogant for even asking the question. But let's be really honest about what this argument is. It's a cop-out. It's not an explanation, it's the absence of an explanation. Think about it in any other context. Imagine a CEO runs a company into the ground, losing everyone's life savings. When the investigators ask him to explain his disastrous decisions, he just says, "My business strategy is mysterious and beyond your comprehension." Would anyone accept that? No, they'd call it fraud. If a doctor was caught harming a patient and his only defense was, "You can't question my methods, they're too mysterious for you to understand," he wouldn't be seen as wise. He'd lose his medical license and probably go to jail. We would never accept this line of reasoning from any human being in a position of power. So why is it a valid excuse for the most powerful being in the universe? Here's the problem. A moral system that has to be shielded by mystery isn't a moral system at all. It's just a system of arbitrary power. If any action, no matter how cruel or monstrous, can be justified by saying it's part of a secret plan, then the word good has no meaning. Morality becomes whatever the dictator in the sky says it is on any given day. You can justify anything with that excuse. So when someone tells you that you're just too simple-minded to understand God's plan, what they're really saying is that they have no good answers. They're admitting that God's actions, when viewed through a normal human lens of compassion and justice, are indefensible. Therefore, we have to reject the mystery excuse and judge this character by the only evidence we actually have: his actions and his laws written down in black and white. And that evidence is not mysterious at all. It's brutally clear. So when you put it all together, the mass murder, the psychological abuse, the laws endorsing slavery and genocide, and you've backed it all up with chapter and verse, a very clear picture emerges. The God of the Bible is not good. He's not just. By any modern standard of ethics, he is a villain. He's a character who was jealous, petty, violent, and obsessed with control. And the question is, why? Why would the supposed source of all morality be a character that fails every moral test we'd apply to a human being? The answer, I think, is simple. We're told that humans were made in God's image, but all the evidence in the book points to the exact opposite. This God was made in man's image. He wasn't discovered, he was invented. He is a projection of the men who wrote these stories, tribal, patriarchal warlords from a brutal and superstitious time. They created a God that reflected their own values, a God who was territorial, demanded absolute loyalty, saw women as property, endorsed slavery, and solved his problems with overwhelming violence. He's not a divine being, he's a deeply, tragically human one, reflecting the very worst parts of our nature. And here's the most important part. We don't need him to be good. We're often told that without this God, there is no morality. But that's not true. Real morality doesn't come from the threats of a cosmic dictator. It comes from empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It comes from reason, our ability to think about the consequences of our actions. And it comes from our shared human desire to live in a world with less suffering and more well-being. We didn't learn compassion from stories of genocide. We didn't learn justice from a God who punishes the innocent. We learned those things from each other. In fact, human morality has only gotten better the more we've moved away from these ancient, brutal texts and started thinking for ourselves. The God of the Bible isn't a guide to follow. He's a cautionary tale. He is a relic from a primitive past, and it's a past we should be evolving beyond. Thanks for watching. I know this was one heavy one. If you made it all the way to the end, hit that like button so I know you're out there. I genuinely love to know what you think, so drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if this video made you think, share it with someone you know who might need to hear this perspective. Let's encourage people to read the book for themselves without the filter of faith. Until next time, stay rational.